there's sort of a deafening agreement now from all kinds of different expert groups and commissions and pieces of work that have been done, not under the context of the COP, but more broadly about the sort of magnitude of the financing need. It's about $3 trillion a year. By the time we get to 2030, about 2 trillion of that's going to be domestically mobilized, 1 trillion that's going to be international. It's needed to high emitting countries or large emitting countries have got to ramp down their emissions very, very fast, faster than they are at the moment. And we need these funds, these 3 trillion into emerging markets and developing economies to help build out the green infrastructure that is necessary, and from an equity point of view, as well as from a management of adaptation, resilience, and growth point of view, and to enable countries to build into their resilience and adaptation needs. So yeah, that's not loose change. That's a considerable amount of money, but we know that we're subsidizing fossil fuels at $7 trillion a year, more now than before the pandemic. And we know that just in 2022 alone, the oil and gas industry made $4 trillion worth of windfall profits in a year. So it's about redirecting the international financial system, which we understood a year ago was completely unfit for purpose, and there was an agreement around that. And there's been a lot of work done this year for Bridgetown, the Bridgetown Agenda, and other work done under the G20 to sort of show what the pathway forward is and where do we get that $1 trillion from. When it comes to the COP, then there's very important things that the COP can do. The COP can join this sort of financial conversation, which is now happening in sort of international economic conference rooms and hallways, to the very specific needs in the Paris Agreement. And I think while everybody focuses on the sort of festival atmosphere and the trade fair that is COP, governments have dropped the ball in many cases, or have struggled to pick up the ball for countries with less capacity since Paris. So Paris is working. It's not working fast enough. We started too late. But the effect of the stock take on the finance agreement is that countries have got to sort of roll their sleeves up and come up with effective work plans on the things that are most important, that are going to benefit people from an equity point of view, and so allow them to do well while we transition, and reduce emissions and build resilience, depending on where you are in the world. So lots of innovative ideas are being talked about, and I think we've heard from France and Kenya and Canada and others, and Barbados, that they're going to be working on innovative international taxation instruments, which could float the loss and damage fund, and which could contribute to adaptation resilience. So this is fees on bunker fuels, fees on international financial transaction taxes, possible windfall profit mechanisms, business class air travel, etc. That's going to have a serious task force now working on it. Secondly, carbon markets. We've had a year of a drip of horror stories of greedy, bad offset deals in the past. The rules are now coming into place for how that market works with integrity. The amounts of funding that could be directed out of voluntary carbon markets by 2030, 50, 60 billion. We could release 15 to 20 billion dollars worth of investments by companies in good projects fairly quickly, with some other sort of flexibilities, and that you'll see a lot about that at the COP as well. So how do carbon markets play their role? But again, let's focus back on governments. Very few governments have effectively priced carbon since Paris. Too few governments have moved forward with comprehensive sort of plans for how they're going to manage their carbon markets that are regulated, how they're going to use 6.2 and 6.4 of the agreement, how they're going to embrace voluntary carbon markets. So governments need help in many cases to be able to do that, and others just need to get to get going. It's very difficult to imagine how we deliver on Paris if we don't actually have effective pricing on carbon in different ways. And of course, the trade agenda becomes more important. We have Trade Day at this COP as well. And there you see the emergence of carbon border adjustments and other trade measures. And the important thing here is to make sure that for emerging market developing economies, that isn't an additional barrier to them being able to benefit from the transition of the green economy globally. So some of these things are all starting to come together. So finance is the golden thread that runs through all of these COPs, and we there are people trying to raise money for a methane fund to provide support to those countries that need it, but at the same time, the oil and gas industry is committing, I think, to some pot of money that it's going to put money in to help other countries. But I think we're really at a point where pledges are not enough. We're post-pledge now. We need binding agreements and binding commitments, and we need governments to roll their sleeves up. We need companies to be held to account when they make these kinds of commitments and pledges, and they've got to be proportionate. So you can't make trillions of dollars of profit and then put, a few, 5 million into a fund and think that that's anything other than disproportionate. So the trick for the presidency is to bring the voluntary commitments and pledges and fundraising that goes on in the sort of trade fair part of a COP, and the need to hold governments to account, but also hold non-state actors to account for how we shift the financial flows and have that come together as a whole being more than the sum of the parts, realizing that many of the things that are going to make these transitions possible are actually negotiated in other hallways by other ministers on other days.
Thanks, Rachel. And Gina, Rachel just kind of spoke about how we need to go beyond